Hi, welcome to today's Humpday Hangout. My name is Bobby Halton. I'm with Fire Engineering, Fire Rescue, Firefighter Nation, and FDIC, and Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment magazines. We're very proud to bring you all those products, and this Hangout today is being brought to you by FDIC and all of the great magazines here at Penwell that help serve the fire service in many different ways. So we're glad that you're able to join us today. We've got a great topic today. We're going to be talking with a couple of my good friends who are currently running the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, which if you're not a member of, please consider joining. You don't have to be an instructor right now, but every firefighter, in my opinion, is an instructor. Whether you're doing a small class to some students who stopped up by on fire behavior or firefighter day from the local elementary school, and you're giving just a quick walk through the station, that's a class. Or if it's a drill day and your officer has designated you to do the drill that day on whether it's the SCBA or the K-12 or whatever he asked you to do drill on, you're teaching that day. So the society can help you. There's just an incredible amount of tools and support there that can help you to be a better instructor, because I believe that every firefighter is an instructor, just like every Marine's a rifleman, every sailor's a firefighter, every firefighter's an instructor. So with that being said, we've got three great friends with us today. I don't know if Al's made it yet. I'll give Al a hard time. We're a little delayed because we're waiting for Al Schlick to join us. Al's had some technical difficulties, so we'll give him a hard time about that when he gets here. If you have a question, you can get us at hashtag FETalk, and our producer Brandon will shoot me your questions. I've got my phone ready here, so he'll shoot me your questions. So hashtag FETalk if you have a question about the society, about training, about the fire service. And sometime during the broadcast, I'll let my good friend Steve Pegram tell us what question he wants to throw out there. But whoever gets it right, or however Steve puts it together, we'll send him this fire dynamics video that was done by Dan Majikowski, John Cirillo, and Ted Nee. And it's a great fire dynamics video. It answers a lot of folks' questions about fire dynamics, and it's a combination of Dan, who's the consummate intellectual about fire behavior, Ted, who's a 35-year veteran of the fire service, worked his way up through the ranks, and my good friend John Cirillo, who's with the FDNY, another man who's worked his way up through the ranks. John's currently a captain with the FDNY, but guys who earn their stripes the hard way. So that's what we're going to start off with right now. We're going to just go around the room real quick. I'll introduce myself, Bobby Halton. Came up through the ranks in the Albuquerque Fire Department, held every position from firefighter all the way to deputy chief. Then went on to I was also chief of training for several years. Then went on to run the Coppell, Texas Fire Department as their fire chief. And now I'm the educational director of FDIC and the editorial content director for Fire Rescue Magazine, Fire Engineering, where I'm the editor-in-chief, and Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. So that's my pedigree. Been in the fire service now for 35, 40 years, somewhere in there, count my volunteer time. And with us today is my good friend Chad Hoefle. Chad, why don't you give everybody your pedigree and tell them what you're doing with the Instructors Society today, and then we'll introduce Steve and Al.
Excellent. So, as Bobby said, I'm Chad Hoefle. I'm the fire chief of Stillman Fire Protection District in northern Illinois. I started out with the society on and off, taken some classes first off, and got very interested in what they were doing. I thought it extremely wonderful cause of what they're doing. I was approached to help Al Schlick with his radio show through Fire Engineering, which I have a great time doing with Al. Al does a wonderful job, and I have a good time with that. I got 18 years in the fire service, all with Stillman Fire Protection District. Started out right out of high school, worked my way up into a full-time position, tested in for a full-time deputy chief spot in charge of training. I did that a couple of years, and then tested into the chief spot. And I think my claim to fame is working very hard to be involved with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation and so forth. So that's kind of where I'm at, and hopefully can help answer some questions and learn a little bit as I go as well.
Outstanding. Steve, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll start with our Humpday Hangout.
Sure. I'm Steve Pegram, the fire chief in Goshen, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cincinnati. I've been fire chief here for 5 years, and prior to that, I've been in the career and volunteer fire service for 25-plus years, served every rank, firefighter to chief on the career side, and I've also served every rank, firefighter to chief on the volunteer side. And but about 8-9 years ago, I got involved with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, and lucky for me, I got in at the right time and was able to get heavily involved in the transition they were going through and the partnership with Fire Engineering and Penwell FDIC, and served under President Eddie Buchanan and then President Doug Klein. And basically, I just grabbed onto their coattails, and the next thing I knew, I was elected president. So I took over as president of the society this past year at FDIC, and currently serving as the president. And it's been a great opportunity to meet a lot of great people and get to do fun things like Google Hangouts. So I'm glad to be here.
I heard that they had a meeting and you were late, and that's how you got to be president.
That could possibly be true. We'll see about that.
Well, I got to tell you, these are two great guests, and I want to talk a little bit about the society because I think a lot of folks don't know about it, as I kind of opened up. So, just real quickly, not even quickly, let's talk about the society for a while. I'll tell you, it's been around forever. What a lot of folks don't know is that FDIC was actually run by the society for many years, and then the society ran into some financial trouble and whatnot and had to sell it, and that's how Penwell eventually was able to purchase it to keep FDIC alive, because the societies was just going to have to just let it go and just end the conference. And that was about 20 or 21 years ago. It was about 20 to 20, either 20 or 21. I can't remember off the top of my head. But let's talk a little bit about the society today and what the benefits to joining it are, what the society does, and how folks can become a member. So I'll just throw it out to Chad and Steve. What is the purpose of the society, and why should a firefighter out there listening today consider joining?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll kick it off. Basically, the best way I look at it is a lot of what you already said, Bobby, is everybody in the fire service I view as an instructor in one way or another. You don't have to be a training officer. You don't have to be the chief. We all have a responsibility to train each other. And so the Instructor Society, I think, is unique in that it's not the Chiefs Association, it's not the Firefighters Association, it's the Instructor Society, and everybody and anybody can be an instructor. So the first thing for people to understand is, I'll give you my example. I joined the Instructor Society when I was 19 years old and a volunteer lieutenant in New Jersey. And I joined because some of my mentors and people I had met from attending FDIC grabbed me by the coat and walked me over to the booth and said, "Here, you need to join." And I really didn't even know what it was, but I joined, and I started getting, back then they got the instructograms. You'd get your package in the mail from the society every month with lesson plans and information, and that's how I got engaged, and as a young officer started to benefit from the society. And then, as you mentioned, went through some tough years and some reorganization. And I think today the biggest focus as we discuss things amongst the society and the board of directors is we still are focused strictly on the instructor. And what do instructors need in information and resources to do their job better? So we try to develop curriculum and develop programs. Our 1403 live fire instructor credential is an example of that. We saw a need for a program to help live fire instructors teach the 1403 program safely and do live fire safely, and that's been hugely successful and even adopted in a few states as their model program. And we're working on a lot of the technology stuff, flipping the classroom, that sort of stuff. We did a seminar on that a few years ago. But more recently, we've gotten into some of the fire dynamic stuff. And what a lot of people don't realize or understand is NIST, Dan Majikowski and his crew that do a lot of fire behavior research and that sort of thing, they live and die off of grants and support from other agencies. So ISFSI was able to secure grant funding, and then we, in turn, hired, if you will, NIST to do their burns in South Carolina the past 2 years in 2013 and 2014. So more recently, we've gotten into the realm of the fire dynamics work that's going on, both as the arm that helped fund the research burns and stuff like that, but now we're working on trying to develop curriculum and training materials based upon that research, just to put stuff in the hands of instructors. So I would say the core mission is to support instructors.
That's outstanding.
I think if I can piggyback on that real quick, Steve, is Bobby, that I think the thing that works well for me in small town USA, as far as what Steve said, is that with the society, we make one phone call if we need something, and the society says, if we don't have somebody readily available, we'll get somebody readily available. I remember before I was involved necessarily with the society, and I don't have anything to do with the admin at the society, but I had made one phone call to Al Schlick and said, hey, I need somebody to come out here and teach a class. I got a house we're getting ready to burn down, and I want somebody here that from the outside that can bring something in and help people out. And came out, brought another instructor with him, and said, we will take care of this. We will make sure everybody is educated, informed, and I think that's the magic of the society. Is there's so many associations, like Steve said, and there's so many different places that you can get your niche in the fire service, and the society is out there for the instructors to better them, and that's what I've seen just in the necessarily research that I've done and the looking that I've found.
Well, I think I'd like to kind of bounce off a few things that the both of you just said, because it's a hangout. I think you said some really important things. One of the things I think that inhibit guys and gals from teaching, firefighters from teaching, is they think that, well, I don't know how to put together a lesson plan. I don't know how to set up course objectives. I know what I want to say. They say, I've got an idea of what I want to teach, but I don't know how to structure it in a way that makes sense. And one of the things that I think is neat about the society is that they'll help you to do that. There's actually classes that you can take with the society, and there's folks that'll reach out and help you to teach you how to take a topic. Say the topic is something like a hose line advancement on, say, a 2-story, or 3-story walk-ups or whatever. They can say, okay, well, what's your overall objective, and they'll help you lay it out in a logical way so that you can learn how to be an instructor. And then a lot of it, that Steve and I can attest to, is, and Chad also, is that it's like the old joke, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right? And I think that a lot of us a lot of firefighters out there contact me all the time saying, I want to teach, but I'm just not sure how. So one of the benefits of joining the society is that brings it in here. But one of the other benefits I think that Steve and Chad both touched on is the 1403 class. And when we do live fire training, it's not acceptable to just say we want people to experience what fire's like. You've got to have objectives in your training. You've got to have a plan. And the other thing that the society is doing, which I think is just incredible with the 1403 class, is if you go through it, then you have credentials that say you understand certain aspects of this standard. Just reading the standard and saying you're following it might not hold up in a court of law, if something happens. And if something does happen, folks are going to hold you accountable, and you might find yourself in court. Isn't that true? I mean, I'm not overstating the case. Am I, Steve?
No, I don't think at all. I think from an instructor standpoint, and definitely as a chief officer standpoint, one of the frustrations I think all of us have is when somebody gets seriously hurt or killed in training. And we constantly deal with that struggle, and I've dealt with it when I was, for 7 years, I was a full-time training officer in a career department. And so I was always trying to make the training as realistic as possible to the real world, but also trying to make sure that we didn't tip the scale too much and end up getting somebody hurt or killed in a training environment. And that's what the society saw was occurring is we had several line-of-duty deaths involving live fire training. And, the NFPA standard was out there, but nobody was really taking the standard and applying it to a lesson plan and a curriculum and teaching it. And so that's what the Instructor Society picked up and ran with, and I think it's worked real well for us.
Yeah, and I think, Chad, get your opinion on it. I think just having a standard is great, but being able to teach to that standard, you have to have a curriculum.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the society does a great job with that. The amount of resources that they have for the ability for somebody that wants to be an instructor, and it takes, as we all know, it takes a certain type of person to be able to instruct and to instruct well. But there's a lot of people that really would like to. The society will help them get started. It'll definitely show you where your weaknesses are at as an instructor through evaluations and so forth. But the society has a way to make sure that you have the resources needed for instructors, because you might have a small town department that their best guy to teach might not be a great instructor, but he's going to get the resources that he needs to do it to the best of his ability.
Well, and some of the other benefits, I just want to talk about benefits of the society for a while before we get into actual training questions, which I think I got about 1 million of them running through my head listening to you two guys. What are some of the other benefits that we can let folks know about? How much does it cost to join the society, and what are some of the benefits I get if I do join the society?
Well, to start off, the easiest way to join the society is go to our website, isfsi.org. You can join right from the internet, or you can call our office. The phone number's on our website, and join that way. But the easiest thing to do is you can do it all right online. It's $125 a year to be a member of the society, and then that also unlocks the backside of our website, which is where we have resources stored, information about classes, downloads, lesson plans. We have a chat room on different topics where people can post questions and get answers to questions and things like that. But all that stuff is locked down for members only. So you kind of have to pay the $125, become a member of the society, then it unlocks that door for you. And that's the biggest benefit I've seen in joining the society is the resources, but also the mentoring that I got from other members and the people I met through the society, and definitely benefited my career. So that's what I tell young fire officers and instructors especially, is it's an opportunity. It's kind of getting an invitation to the castle. And a great example is when we do our instructor social at FDIC on Tuesday night, and anybody who's a member of the society, anybody that teaches at FDIC is invited. And every year I sit there and look at the room and look around the room and see the people that are there, and it's like, wow, this is really cool. Just because of the talent that's there and the people that are there. And these are people that I now call peers that 5, 10, 15 years ago, I was the kid sitting at FDIC looking up at the stage going, wow, it would be really cool to be able to shake Bobby Halton's hand and have coffee with him one day. And, you know, now I can pick up and text him on my cell phone anytime I want. And that's what the society did for me, and I think that's a great example, is just that opportunity of networking and mentoring. But join the society. And when you talk about benefits, we have programs with several publishers, including Penwell and Fire Engineering. You get discounts in their bookstore. Any books, videos, CDs you want to buy, if you're a member of the society and you tell them that you're a member of the society, you'll get a discount on those purchases. You get a discount to FDIC, which I can't plug enough. I think it's the greatest show on earth. We all talk about, those of us that go to it every year, you wait for FDIC so you get reinvigorated, pumped up, and ready to go for another year. And I point out to a lot of people, if you go to FDIC for a week, if you take the hot programs, if you truly engage in the whole week experience, which you should, and you're a member of the society, you almost save enough on your registration through the discount that what the membership for the year cost you.
What does it cost me, Steve, if I want to join?
It's $125 is the membership dues.
And that's good for a full year?
That's good for a full year. And then if you take our 1403 program, you automatically become a member of the society. So that's another avenue for membership as well.
Do we have any scheduled 1403s right now?
I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I'll get you an answer before we're done here.
Yeah, and if you could send it to us, we'll be happy to post that on fireengineering.com so the folks can know if there's a 1403 class coming to an area nearby you. Take that class, you become a member, and then you get all those benefits, buying fire techs, coming to FDIC. And I'll tell you what, I'm trying to think of the name of the place where the instructor dinner is going to be this year. The instructor gathering is going to be this year. I stopped by their new location. It's like Charlie's or someplace like that at FDIC. Is that the name of it?
I'm not sure. We were going back and forth, and I don't know if it finally got the contract signed.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, but it's always a great time. So
it is now. Make a decision right now.
Yeah, I mean, Chad and Steve were just off. There are a lot of benefits for joining the society. Far more than it's tremendous value for $125. I mean, it really is. Getting into the chat room and being able to talk to people about putting together a class. I've done it. I've gone online. I do classes on fireground decision making and learning from the experience of others and leadership and stuff like that. And lots of times I'll go online into the chat room and I'll ask a question, like I'm doing something with RPD with Gary Klein, but Dr. Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, kind of disagrees with them. How do you balance that out? And And it's kind of neat because you get to bounce some of your thoughts off of other instructors who can say, yeah, I ran into the same problem, or this is what I found, or you got to read what this guy Decker said about it, or McLucas, or whatever, and it really helps you keep your education level up high by being a member of the society. So, there are tons of benefits. There's all kinds of functions, whether it's classes, whether it's FDIC, and that's where the annual meeting is, where you can come participate in the annual meeting. I try to make it every year and stop in and hang out as long as I can, and I know Steve is going to be there this year running the meeting. But you get to meet these great guys like Chad and Steve and Al. Has Al been able to get through yet? I got to give Al a hard time. Has Al been able to get on yet, or is he still out there struggling with the interweb?
He's struggling. He just sent me a message, and his apologies to everybody. He's struggling with technology at this point. So,
well, yeah,
that's where we're at.
I think I'm going to make an instructor's observation here. I think that this interweb thing is here to stay. I don't think it's going away.
Absolutely. And, to piggyback onto Steve real quick, and since we're talking about technology, just real quick, the Society's website has changed as well. It's extremely easy to follow. There's, like Steve said, a lot of different resources, but very easy to follow. If you haven't been on the website in a while, it's definitely time to log back on and just take a peruse and to see how it can help you. Even if you're not a member, obviously that's where the goal is, to get as many members as we can so they can benefit from the resources. But the website's very easy to follow with a ton of information on it.
Outstanding. Well, let's talk a little bit about training and what's going on out there in the fire service today. And I got a question for both you guys, because you're out there, you're doing training, and you're out among the folks. What are the most important training topics today? And I don't mean what are trending or popular, but really what are the most important training topics for, I think, the three major groups: firefighters, which encompasses all of us, but I mean firefighters who are task-oriented and on the fire ground today; officers, and that can be captains, lieutenants, whatever flavor you have in your organization, but officers; and then for chief officers, what do you think of the not what are trending? We all know fire behavior and all that good stuff is trending. We think that's great and clearly important, and maybe you think that is the most important. But what are the most important topics out there today that you see between the two of you, who are obviously some of the most connected guys as far as training go in the fire industry? What do you think are the most important things that we should be training on, or that we are training on?
I'm seeing right now, Bobby, that a lot of us, and I've tried to do a couple of different things. If you're working on something and you hit a plateau, especially, I look at, I can vouch for small town USA, because that's what I happen to be a part of, and small combination department. We have so many people involved in so many things. We got techie guys, we've got guys that like the truck company work, and guys that like the engine company. I think we have a lot of times in small town USA guys that want to do the very advanced, the most advanced training that we can get in a small town. And what we try to make sure people understand is that, and I don't know where I heard this, but I did hear it, the fact that if you train on the basics to the point where you're great at the basics, your basic skills will become advanced skills. And the fact that if we can get everybody in the group to master the basics, then the advanced are going to just be those basic skills that we need to tune in just a little bit. And so we're trying to take a shift in essentially this area that gets us focused back on the basics, the basic firefighter operation stuff, get everybody tuned into those. That way these advanced skills come a lot easier to us as far as our firefighters go. And I don't know, Steve can see where he thinks with that as well. So
I totally agree with you, and one of the things that I always concern me is I go and visit a lot of fire departments, and you see a lot of places that are trying to be, like you said, experts in everything, and instead they become mediocre at everything.
Exactly.
And I think, I know a few years ago there was a big push for back to the basics, and I think that's really important, and we should never forget that. I mean, we go to fires all the time and see people who can't throw ladders correctly and can't hit a hydrant correctly and can't stretch a line correctly. And so I think every fire department needs to be focusing every day, all the time, on the basics. But I'm going to go a little outside the box here, and the first thing that came to mind when Bobby asked the question is actually something that ISFSI hasn't even addressed yet, but we're addressing locally in our department, and that's physical fitness. And I've come to the determination, and I think it took me getting into the chief chair and having to deal with workers' comp claims and sick leave and that sort of thing and injury leave, to truly feel that if we're not preparing our firefighters, our paramedics, our company officers, and even our chiefs physically, then how do we expect them to do all the other things we do? And it's one of those taboo things to talk about in the fire service, but you know, there's a lot of people, and there's a big push, especially in the younger guys right now, working out and physical fitness. But even in my own department, we've got, you know, a lot of people that are overweight, a lot of people that you know, a year ago couldn't run a lap around the firehouse. And here locally, we implemented a physical fitness training program every day, 9 o'clock. Everybody does it, including myself. And I'm seeing results from it. Not as good as I want to, but I have a small addiction to Oreos and donuts that I'm working through. But it's better than some of the other addictions some of my friends have. But I really think it's physical fitness. I think the fire service needs to get serious about physical fitness and training. I see places where they actually prevent it. The city doesn't allow you to do it, or the union won't do it unless they get compensation for it. And I really, come on, people. Heart attacks, strokes, cancer is killing firefighters. We're killing firefighters on the fire ground through exertion. And if we're not physically fit enough to do the job, then everything else doesn't matter.
Okay, so we kind of covered firefighters real well there. I'll throw in my 2 cents. I think for firefighters, and you know, aside from the stuff we're learning on the technical side with the UL and NIST work and flow paths and ventilation and all those other, you know, basement collapse, that's all very, very important. Absolutely need to be focused on it. But I think that one of the things for firefighters, and then we'll get to officers and chief officers, but from my perspective, is the mental health stuff that we're talking about today. And I really hope that society, you know, helps people to put together some good programs there. I know our good friend, you know, Mark Lampaw with the firefighters. He's a firefighter who's very involved with firefighter mental health, as well as our good friend Jeff Dill with the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. You know, Dan DeGrees with the Rosecrans program and the Florian program. There's some really great folks out there right now. One of the things that for many, many years that we neglected as instructors was trying to teach people about the signs and the warning signs, and also ways to stay mentally healthy, given everything that we do. You know, they call fire the war that never ends. And I've got sons who served in the United States military, and we talk about our military guys and gals getting deployed. Well, firefighters are deployed 365, 24/7. Whether you're a career or volunteer, because you can never turn it off. You know, if you're a firefighter and you're a career firefighter and not a volunteer, or if you're a two-hatter and you happen to be in the grocery store and somebody collapses or slips and falls, what do you drop into? Your firefighter mode. So I think that educationally, the thing that I was very excited to hear about is that we're really embracing the Initiative 13, and I applaud Ron Sarnicki and the guys and gals at the National Fallen Firefighter Academy, you know, or firefighters, National Fallen Firefighters, for embracing this. I think that we need to do more at the very basic level about how to stay mentally healthy, and then how to support one another when one of us does develop either a mental illness that's job-related or not job-related. I think some of the things we need to do culturally, and then we'll move on to officers and training, but we need to stop categorizing people as 1013s or 578s or, you know, frequent flyers. Those are somebody's brother and mother and sister and child, and we need to bring up the respect level that we have for those people who are suffering with mental illness, because it may turn out to be one of our brother or sister firefighters someday that slip into depression or slip into bipolar issues or have problems with whatever. It doesn't make them a bad person. It makes them a person who's struggling with an illness that's much like a cancer or any other illness. And I'm really happy to see that training moving up for firefighters. So that's kind of that's the important training that I think is starting to get some traction and get out there. And it's a little tougher than throwing ladders, and it's a little tougher than forcible entry and through the lock and stuff like that, but it's something that I think is going to really, really make us even more important to our communities as we get better and better at dealing with mental health issues, and physical fitness is a big part of that. So Guys, what do you think for officers, for company officers? What do you think's the big topic there, or what do you think's the most important thing that the officers should be focusing their training levels on?
Well, I think you kind of hit on something that I was thinking about, Bobby. Was with officers, we have to. Our officers should be proficient in those basic skills. They should very much be proficient in helping teach those skills to our firefighters. But we need to teach the officers, and I see this in my world, that we need to teach the officers to treat people like people. And it goes back to, like you said, the frequent flyer calls. If we have an officer that sees one of our paramedics or one of our firefighters that really treats somebody like a person and not just another call, those people need to be praised, and our officers need to understand the gift of praise and the value of a thank you. And I think if we build at least I see in the combination world, that we build our people up and make them feel a part of the team and make them feel like they're needed and make them feel like they're wanted and that they are just truly doing a good job, then we're doing our job as company officers, and we're making sure that they follow through with their people. And I think that's extremely important, and that kind of piggybacks on what you said with making sure that these aren't just everyday calls. It's somebody's worst day, and if we as company officers can praise our officer or praise our people for doing the job that they signed on to do, that's only going to take them to another level and want them to do better. So I think company officer training definitely needs to involve some how to deal with people, how to deal with praising people, and at the other extreme, how to deal with disciplining people in the proper way.
Wow. Anything you want to add there, Steve?
Sure. I agree with everything he said, and one of the biggest challenges I've seen and heard about is people that, especially newly promoted officers, and you don't hear a lot about an officer getting demoted or in trouble over a fire or a rescue call, but you do hear of them getting in trouble and demoted or whatever over stuff going on in the firehouse, antics, personnel issues, disciplinary issues, things like that. So I think that's very, very important, and there's fire officer programs and a lot of programs that focus on that personnel stuff and the people stuff, how to interact with people. But what I tell people when they're promoted or when I'm interviewing people in promotional processes is think of the officer who you like to work for the least in your career. Think about that person for a minute. Think about what they did, and don't do that. And if you follow that simple rule, a lot of what you'll do in your career as an officer will work out pretty well for you. The other thing I was thinking about is, especially in my neck of the woods and a lot of parts of the country, is there's a lot of talk about less fires. And I've actually seen where a lot of company officers are getting promoted with very little fire duty, actual hands-on, on a hose line or on a truck company doing searches and stuff. And I actually had an experience a few years ago where we were doing training, and a lieutenant was told to take the crew to the roof and cut a vent hole. And this is in a live fire training situation. And the lieutenant looked up and, the deer in the headlight look, they had never started the saw.
Oh, wow.
So how can you get promoted to a company officer position and never started the saw before? Well, every time they'd gone on a run, somebody else had started the saw. And when they were, it fell through the cracks. So I think as much as we do with firefighters and getting back to the basics, we need to make sure that we're training our company officers to be in a leadership role in the firehouse, but also to be in a leadership role on the fire ground and on the emergency scenes, and making sure that we're properly preparing them to lead those companies. And there's nothing we can do about a lack of calls or a lack of fires in a lot of places. So we have to come up with good hands-on training, simulation, sets and reps to ensure that the people learn the stuff so they have the muscle memory when the real call happens and they're put in that position.
That's an amazing story to begin with, but we've got dozens of examples of firefighters who were trained to do stuff like start saws without their gloves on, and then under pressure, they've been in fire scenes where they pulled their gloves off in order to start a saw or to do something with their SCBA because they've never done it, gloved up in context. So I think that's a really good example. The other thing I like that you said, just a couple of things, just touch on what you said, kind of like an ombudsman here, commenting on your comments, but learning from bad examples. I just watched Rick Lasky and John Salka, they invited me up to participate in one of their company officer academies, which was great day, but Rick does the same thing. He has the class go through, hey, give us some examples of some of poor leadership that you've seen, some of the poor officers. It was a really fascinating deal, and he had the same exact take that you had, Steve. In other words, you can learn as much from the folks who failed to meet our expectations as the folks who did. And then some of the stuff you said, Chad, what a great line. The value of a thank you. What an incredible statement. There's so much. Well, we could do a whole hangout on just the value of secondhand praise and how to tell people they're doing a good job. That was really neat. And then the other phrase that you used, the power of praise. I mean, that could be the title of a book. That's a topic that there's a class right there. There's two classes right there. The value of a thank you and the power of praise. I mean, those are two classes that I'd want to see at FDIC if someone out there is thinking, boy, what could I teach on? That right there. I think for me, the thing that I think that officers should be looking at right now, and I think that would probably be a big topic for the next 5 or 6 years, is sexual assault. I think the fire service for too long has put our heads in the sand and pretended that the issue didn't exist, but it does exist. And I think that officers are responsible for the environment, as Steve, and the climate, as Steve and Chad just said more eloquently than I ever could, within their commands and within their houses. And I think that the issue of sexual assault is something that we need to be honest about, we need to be open about, and we need to confront head on. And I'd highly recommend people go to the iwomen.org site. That's iwomen.org, and the great organization. We got great information there about how you can recognize it, how you can deal with it in your organizations. But it's something that we need to be very, very aware of. So please, if you're not, Google sexual assault. There's all kinds of talks out there. I was very honored to have Angela Hughes come on and talk the other day about sexual assault in the fire service. Eye-opening for me, and I think that's something the officers should look at. What about for chiefs, guys? What do you think chiefs should be looking at for training and education?
Well, Bobby, I'm kind of going along with everything that we've said before. Is chiefs need to be at that level where they need to understand specifically where they need improvement. I know areas that I feel I need improvement. Whether it be I feel proficient on the fire ground, but I need to work more on accounting practices, or and all chiefs, depending on where you're from, whether you're combination, volunteer, full time, you have different responsibilities. There's neighboring departments to me that the chief of the department doesn't touch personnel issues even a little bit, and a department to the other direction, the chief is a sole party in charge of disciplinary problems. So I think the fire chiefs in general need to figure out what it is that they're lacking in their area or their department and need to focus on it. But they also need to work on training themselves how to make their department better. When I took the chief spot 5 years ago, we were in a progression where we had to start learning a lot of new things. We didn't have an employee assistance program. We didn't have a lot of things that I felt were very important. So understanding that the fire chief has to push the things that are going to be the best for the department, and Steve touched on having a physical fitness program. How do you do that in a combination department? How do you do that in a volunteer department where you can't tell somebody, hey, we're going to withhold your paycheck if you don't do this, or we're not going to reward you if you don't do this? Those are things that we need to be inventive as fire chiefs and figure out how can we adapt a training program to help our own department. How can we speak to our boards or our city managers about making sure that we have an employee assistance program? Those are the things that I feel. The personnel issues, hopefully we've gotten to the point at a chief's position where we've been able to handle those types of things, but we need to figure out where we need to get better as individuals and then train on those things hard. So I know that's very broad, but I know a lot of chiefs. I talk to a whole lot of people, as you both do as well, and I hear this different things. Well, I need to work on this more, and I need to work on this more. But pushing your weaknesses is something that is one that we need to start doing.
Wow.
Great.
Steve, what do you think, buddy?
I think I got all kinds of thoughts, but first thing that came to mind was, I tell people that since I got the 5th Bugle that I'm more an accountant than anything else. And I get bogged down in my day quite often with budget, payroll, all these administrative functions that have absolutely nothing to do with fire trucks and ambulances and emergency services. So I need to remember, especially in my department, because it's a smaller combination department, where I could still be the incident commander of the fire today in Goshen, and tomorrow I could have the fire floor at a mutual aid fire in Lovell and Sims. So I still have to be proficient as a firefighter and a company officer and know what's going on in the street and the tactical side of things, but I also have to make sure that I'm prepared on an administrative side to appease my bosses and make sure I keep employed. So I think it's important that fire chiefs realize that balance, because you hear quite often about a fire chief who, man, he was a great guy when he was a lieutenant and a captain and a battalion chief, and then he got the 5th bugle and he lost his mind. And I don't think it's that they lose their mind. I think it's that their priorities change, and often their priorities change because mayor and city council change it for them. And I understand it's a struggle, but I think it's very important for chief officers and people that are coming up to a chief position have that balance between the tactical side of their job and responding out to an emergency, but also making sure that they balance the budget and do payroll correctly. And I heard recently of a fire department, I believe it was in Connecticut, that was investigating some chief officers who spend 99% of their time in the office, but then they were coming out on a working fire and taking command. And the battalion chiefs and a few other people were not real happy with how they ran the fire, and really thought, from what I read online, that they were making poor decisions. And I think that happens because sometimes we forget as a chief officer, when we're spending 99% of our time doing budget and payroll, you might not be the best person to take command of a house fire. And if you're going to take command of that house fire, you got to make sure that you're, going to the sim lab and doing the sets and reps if you do blue card or something like that, like we do, with the lieutenants and captains and battalion chiefs, to make sure that you're proficient and you're getting the same level of training. The other thing that comes to mind, go ahead, Bobby.
No, or go to the fire and assume command of the accounting department.
Sure, that's an option too. The other thing that comes to mind is I'm a big proponent of being a life learner. It took me 5 years to get my associate's degree. It took me 20 years to get my bachelor's degree. I've got a goal set to get my master's, and I've already fallen behind on that. But I'm continuing to work on it, and I continue to take a couple of strategy and tactics classes every year, a couple of company officer classes every year, some college level courses every year, and I encourage my firefighters, my lieutenants and captains, and all of them to do the exact same thing. And you got to keep learning, and I know people preach that all the time, but it really is true, that it's not necessarily about what you're studying. And people say, well, why do I need to study that? I learned a lot of stuff in college that had nothing to do with fire science that benefits my job now as a chief, just like I learned a lot of stuff when I did my associate's degree in fire science, learning about tactics and fire prevention and code enforcement, that also benefits me today as a chief as well.
Wow. Just again to be the ombudsman here, I think that just to wrap that all together, we had Chad talking about self-awareness and always being aware of your strengths as well as your limitations, and working on your limitations, which is about being self-aware. And then Steve just kind of said the same thing, being a lifetime learner and how important that is, and also being aware of the fact that if you've been off the fire ground for a while, it may not be the best thing to have you assume command. Maybe the best thing for you to do at a fire when you show up is to just provide moral support and spiritual support for the folks who are going through it, and use some of the stuff that Chad said earlier, that it's an opportunity to praise your folks and point out what's going well, and maybe just get folks coffee and make sure they're doing okay. The thing I would throw out for chief officers this year, and something else I'd like to work with the society on, and I'm working with my good friends at smoke.org, firesmoke.org. Please go there and check out the great training that's available there as well, is toxicity. We're learning a great deal about toxicity on the fire ground, how important it is to our overall health, not just cancers. There's autoimmune diseases that come from it. There's a wide variety of health issues surrounding the toxicity of fires today, and we need to be, I think, constantly reevaluating. When do we wear our packs? What should the exclusionary zone be? What kind of evacuation should we do? I think in years to come, I think you'll see a much broader fire ground than we have today. We tend to be pretty close in our fire ground battles, and I think we'll be moving back a little further. Oftentimes I see rehab that there's just as much smoke in the rehab as there is in the fire, and so I think that for me that would be the chief officer deal. We got a question for you guys, and it comes to us from Robert Davis, and Robert asks, what do you do for the firefighters, and Steve, you were talking about working out, that are hurt on the job and can't do everything in some of those workout programs. Rob believes that firefighters should do some kinds of physical training, but he wants to know what do you do for the folks that get injured during that and can't do that physical training, or they get injured during physical training?
Well, the program we introduced at our department, first off, is non-punitive. Basically, what I told my people is we were going to start requiring certain training throughout the year, physical training, fire tactic-related training. There had never been requirements. You know, if you showed up and you were here and you got the training, great, and if you missed it, that was fine too. And so we set a standard and said there were certain things that you had to be trained on every year. You had to do a live burn. You had to do the SCBA confidence course, etc. But partnering with that, we identified that, you know, some of our employees probably were not in the best shape to do that, and they had some apprehension, and, you know, they were nervous that, you know, this was the new chief trying to get rid of them through, you know, the training and the testing procedure. And I tried to make the point that, no, that's not the case. So we implemented a training program, and I was very lucky that a firefighter from a neighboring jurisdiction just finished his master's degree in occupational health. His master's thesis was on firefighter physical fitness. So I hired him to be our PT guy, and he comes in every day, and he sets up a program for each individual firefighter. So typically we do some type of circuit exercises, but one guy may be lifting 35 pounds, another guy may be lifting 5 pounds. And then we've had some injuries throughout the year, firefighters with shoulder injuries, firefighter with a leg injury. And so, for example, the guy who had the shoulder injury, he was still on the job, light duty, and then back to work. But we didn't throw him to the wolves and make him do the heavy, hard PT workout. We put him on the treadmill. So while the rest of the firefighters were out in the bay doing their circuit of different exercises, the guy who's doing a little bit of rehabilitation is on the treadmill doing a jog, run, or whatever. And so, not everybody's doing the exact same thing. Not everybody's using the same amount of weights or doing the same number of sets and reps, but everybody is moving for 30 minutes is our goal, 30 to 40 minutes.
And I would, to piggyback onto that, what I would say is, as soon as the question was asked, Bobby, I started thinking about SOPs and SOGs. You really need to look at your department's SOPs and SOGs. If your department allows any type of a light duty workout or work at the fire department in general. There's some departments that if you're on light duty, you don't walk in the fire station until you're 100% for fear that you're going to hurt yourself further, and the department's going to have to pay for it, depending on volunteer combination status or full-time. And so you really got to look at what your SOPs and SOGs say as far as what you can do. I know that I ask anytime somebody's going to come back to the fire station after they've been injured, they need to have some type of a note that states what their limitations are, and then we have to fall inside those limitations. But definitely looking at your SOPs and SOGs first to make sure that you're following and abiding by those.
Outstanding. Well, Robert Davis, we're going to send you a copy of Fire Dynamics. So if you would please reach out to me at roberth@penwell.com. That's roberth@penwell.com, or call me. 201-406-8278, 201-406-8278, so I can get your address and we can send you a copy of Fire Dynamics by Fire Engineering. It's got Dan Majikowski, Ted Nee, and John Cirillo. Great video. I know the Instructor Society supports it and promotes it, so get that out to us. We got another question I'd like to cover. It comes to us from Bill Carey. He said, can the panel expand on the dynamic research statements that came out in May about adding new tactics through any and all means necessary? I'll throw that right to you guys.
I really want to. I know exactly the statement that he's referring to, and I think it, in some degree...
Why don't you enlighten the audience about the statement so that we have a little broader...
So 6-8 months ago, well, actually a year ago, the Society was meeting with Dan Majikowski and Steve Kerber and others, discussing the latest burns that had occurred in South Carolina and were going to occur coming up in South Carolina. And the biggest thing the Instructor Society saw was, all right, we've got all this research data and we've got all these charts and graphs and all this information, but not to insult a firefighter, but we wanted to dumb it down so we could understand it. And the biggest thing is all the Celsius to Fahrenheit, so we could actually understand what they were talking about, because I don't do that conversion real well. But out of that program, and we just were having a big round table of the leadership of the society and some invited guests. We started throwing a bunch of stuff up on the wall, almost like a strategic planning process. And Eddie Buchanan from Hanover, Virginia, past president of the society, said, this is what we're doing. This is from what we've seen and what we've read and what we've learned, this is how we're adjusting and changing our tactics. And so that's where the Slice RS acronym came from, and the society developed a video on it and put it out there. And but I tell people all the time, any of this stuff having to do with fire dynamics, things like that, I don't agree that there is a catch-all, be-all, you must, you shall, you do. It is up to each individual fire department to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and what they're going to implement into their department. We were talking about it before we went live today, that a fire in Manhattan that Ray McCormick goes to is very different, or the response is different than the response you're going to get in Hanover, Virginia, where Eddie Buchanan comes from. And Eddie would tell you in his department the Slice RS model works really, really well. And I agree. I've been to his department, and I think it does. In city of New York, maybe it doesn't, or in Chicago, or more urban settings. But really what it boils down to is people are getting real worked up about this fire dynamic stuff and these recommendations and recommendations for change. And I don't think we're trying to say that we're making you change anything. I think what we're trying to say is do the homework, research it. Like I said, be a life learner. Take all the information like a sponge and then apply it to your jurisdiction. What is your staffing on your first out engine company? How long will it be between your first out engine and your second arriving engine? And water supply, ladders, manpower, EMS, command officers, all those things are factors and what you can and cannot do reasonably. And that's one of the things that I've seen in a lot of places is we train like we're the New York City Fire Department, but we have the resources of not even 1/10, and that's where I see departments getting into trouble because they're being, functioning and acting in such a way on the fire ground like they have 60 people arriving simultaneously, but there's 3, and the next engine's going to be 6 minutes away, and the next engine's 6 minutes after that, and the battalion chief's 15 minutes out, and so I don't particularly like, and as the president of the society, I guess I can say I don't like the statement of you must, you shall, you will. But at the same time, I think you must at least look at the information, look at the research, and then. But it's very important to apply it back to your department first in the policy and then in training.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that one of the things I would say, you mentioned 2 of my best friends, Eddie and Ray. What they were talking about was different context, and Steve was talking about it, different fires, and both their acronyms, dicers, and Ray's got dicers, Eddie was doing slicers. They're acronyms, they're learning tools, they're tools that you use when you're doing your sets and reps to develop a consistency, if you will, of response for your organization. So use whatever works. Steve said it beautifully. Use what works for you. But be a student. Find out. What Dan and Provden and Steve and George and everybody involved with the Johnny and Ted, all the folks involved with all the studies, aren't trying to develop new tactics. What they're trying to do is tell us what's going on inside of fires. That's why it's called fire dynamics. They're trying to tell us what's going on inside of fires when we do certain things. When we open a door, what does that do given today's fuel loads, given today's construction issues? And these studies are going to go on for generations because there's generations of buildings for us to look at. Everything we've done so far, really, we've done in 1- and 2-story residentials. But we were chatting the other day about the fact that now there are actually apartment buildings being built with these intermodal containers, basically these flashover simulators. They're taking them and they're putting them together, and they're building apartment buildings out of them. And it's something that's happening all across the country. So, how you fight a fire there is going to be determined by the building construction, as Steve said, the resources, the level of training, the amount of people that you're going to get. There's so many variables, and that's why I think local is so important. And you know, I asked Steve to elaborate on the comment because I wasn't sure of the context that it came from. So thank you for doing that. And Chad, do you have anything you want to add to that before I
Yeah,
bring us up to our final question?
I think a couple years ago when we started in the fire service in general started looking at what Steve and Dan were doing with UL and NIST, we looked at this big, huge, complex formula as to what they were doing, and we begged as a fire service to say, hey, give us some, make it so we can understand it. Give us some ways to implement this. And I think Dan and Steve said, here's the science. Now review it. We're asking you to look at it and review it and make it your own. Make it work for your department, like Steve said. And we begged as a fire service for somebody to come out and make it simpler for us, I think, especially those that don't necessarily have the time to follow up with all the research. So I hand it to these guys, the John Buckmans and the Pete Van Dorps and all these people, Eddie Buchanan's and Ray McCormick, that are making acronyms and making it their own, and then sharing that information, because I think they all come up with these acronyms to say, hey, this is what I do. This is what I think works for me. If you have a similar size department and a similar demographic, maybe it'll work for you. You want to change a letter and implement it with your guys, as long as you train on it and make it yours in your department, then bravo, you've done your research. And we are so very apt to taking what is somebody else's in the fire service and trying to make it our own, that bravo to everybody that's taking those things from these fire service leaders and adapting it to their own. So we got to hand it to those guys that are making these acronyms. And if you don't agree with one guy's because you did some different research, then go to another guy's and say, hey, maybe this will work better for my department. So bravo to the guys that did it. It doesn't mean they're wrong like we talked about earlier. It just means it's different. And we're definitely different in the fire service as long as we can make it work for our departments safely.
Yeah, and what's important, too, I think that everybody needs to understand here is the definition of science. Science is an ongoing process. It never ends. One of the silliest things I ever heard the other day was a politician come out and said, well, the debate is settled and the science is in. You have to remember, if you go back to Newton and Descartes, who gave us a scientific method, most of what they said back then has been amended and changed dramatically, because what we know of, they didn't know about subatomic particles when they came up with the scientific method. They didn't have a socio-technical interface with, there wasn't technology as we know it today, and dynamic complexity or string theory or a myriad of other things that they didn't come up with. And so I think that now we're, one of the things to always be careful of is that nothing's ever settled, and all the good folks, Prav and Gandhi over there at UL Labs and Chris Habsbrook, and we've left off Nelson Briner from UL and from NIST. We always talk about Steve and Dan because they're the fire service front store, but there's hundreds of people behind it, and they'll be the first folks to tell you it's ongoing, and it's going to go forever, and we need to encourage more and more and more studies, and the society, as Steve said so eloquently earlier, is behind that and helping to get that funding and keep them going, and fire engineering has been very involved. We helped maintain the funding back in the early days when we were doing the ventilation studies. So that being said, a great question, and I think what the individual meant, if I'm not speaking out of school here, was that they just wanted to do everything they could to get the information out there, not that they were pushing any agenda. There's nothing worse than a person with an agenda. Well, maybe there's a couple of things worse than it, but it's still a pretty, agendas are tough. You got to be open to, I love people who are open to all kinds of ideas and changes and embrace it and use it, and use it, as Chad said, use what you can and don't use what you can't, and go on down the road, and live with 1 foot raised, ready to take on the next challenge, and that. I'm gonna throw out one last thing to kind of bring us home, and we're a little over the hour, but that's okay because we started a little late. But just to kind of wrap it up, and I'll just let my two guests speak on it, because I can't thank you enough for being here today, guys. I know you got incredibly busy calendars. And I will say one thing before I let him wrap it up, and just so people know how busy Steve is, and I hope you don't get mad at me for doing this, Steve, but I think the audience ought to know today that Steve is coming to us, and he's doing this Google Hangout with us today, and one of the things going on in his life, if you don't know, is that his wife Molly is currently in the hospital, and Molly's a beautiful woman. Steve's got 2 small children. Molly is fighting for her life. She's dealing with a lung ailment that's caused her to have to need a lung transplant, and Molly's a smaller gal, so she's going to be waiting for a smaller set of lungs to come so she can resume her duties as a mom and a wife and a beautiful contributing member of society, and I know that she's going to do that. But one of the things I'd like to ask everybody who's watching this, and if you're not a religious person, you can just do whatever non-religious people do, but if you are a religious person like me, maybe say a prayer for Molly and Steve and his family. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers. If you're not a religious person, send them good vibes or whatever you good folks do. I'm not passing any judgment on it, but keep Steve in your thoughts and prayers. And that's the kind of person Steve is today. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate right now, but he thought it was important enough to be here. And on that note, I'm going to do one thing to you guys before I let you go, is we'd like to kind of give these hangouts a theme going forward in the future. And one of the themes I'd like to have consistently is training, because we're fire engineering. And I'd like to offer to the society right now today the opportunity to have a continuing presence monthly and a hangout one Wednesday a month on training. And you can send whoever representatives you want. If Chad and Steve want to keep coming, or Al wants to keep coming, or maybe just recommend different people who are doing good training throughout the year. But one Wednesday a month is going to be dedicated to talking about training, because I've got 50 more questions and we're out of time. But Steve, if you're willing as president to commit to it, I'm willing to give us one Wednesday a month that'll be on training, and the society will have a seat at it or seats at it, however you want to make that happen.
Sounds great to me, Bobby. I really appreciate it and your kind words. I know you and I have talked offline, and the biggest thing I can say to people without trying to get choked up here is you don't realize how good you have it until you have a crisis. And I have a very low tolerance anymore for complainers, because my wife's not complaining.
Well, Steve, we love you, and we love Molly, and we got you, your children in our thoughts and prayers, and your children are so strong, and I know they're a great source of pride to you, and I think everybody needs to know, you know, what's going on with you, and yet you still continue to contribute and do all the great stuff you're doing. And if you need anything, just please let us know. And we know the good folks out there where Molly is, and I don't know if it's okay for me to say, but I know the firefighters there have stepped up, and if there's anything else that we can do, we sure as heck want to let you know that we want to do that. And Chad, we'll let you close out, and then we'll wrap this up.
Sounds good. I just appreciate everybody. Along with Steve, my thoughts are with you, Steve, and your family, and family's near and dear to my heart. So thoughts with you, and I appreciate you guys letting us bring our presence here to the show, Bobby.
Well, that was my pleasure, and I just wanted to say on behalf of Bill Carey, and if folks don't know who Bill Carey is one of the most incredible human beings on the face of the planet. Volunteer firefighter, true gentleman, huge advocate for firefighter health and safety and wellness and firefighting in general, and also the web editor for Firefighter Nation, a man who does incredible duty and just a beautiful blessing in my life. Bill said that he threw that question out to give the society a chance to explain it, because some folks took it the wrong way, and I think you both did an eloquent job of explaining where that comment came from and the context around it, and that's why Bill wanted to give you all the opportunity, and thank you, Bill, for doing that for us, and thank you for being such an integral part of Fire Engineering and Fire Rescue Magazine and FDIC. And if you folks don't know who Bill Carey is, find out, because that guy is a tremendous blessing to the fire service and a great human being. Well, on behalf of Fire Engineering and FDIC, remember, if you want to participate in the NIST UL studies at FDIC this year, we're doing 4 experiments. Those are filling up fast. It's Monday and Tuesday at the hot training. They're filling up fast. Remember, the society has several classes. Steve is teaching. Chad's going to be there. If you haven't signed up yet, we're, I think, about 160 days out. It's going to fill up fast. It's FDIC. We had 32,000 last year. We'll probably break 35,000, 38,000 this year. Incredible classes. 15 instructors from, we're going to have over 590 instructors, but 15 instructors are international instructors who will be teaching. People from Lars from Norway, Sweden, Australia, Great Britain, all over the world. We have instructors coming from 53 different countries are coming to attend an instructors meeting, as well as 15 instructors from around the world who will actually be instructing. Next year we'll have more. Truly is an international experience. Steve does an incredible job of getting folks to teach for us and train for us. Please join the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Go to the website right now. It's ISFSI.org. Spend the $125. It'll be the best investment you can make. I guarantee you'll get every penny of it back. We're going to be doing a monthly show with Steve and the IFSI on training. We'll have that up pretty soon in January. We'll post what we're going to do. Every week we'll have a different topic. Right now I'm looking at training, the fire ground, health and wellness, and I haven't picked the fourth big overriding topic, but I think we'll do just a general issues and concerns. We're looking for people who you think you might want to have be the anchor. I want Steve to be the anchor of this one. I want the society to be the anchor of training. And that's my offer to the society and to my good friend Steve Pegram. And I'll close it out with Steve. I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of Molly. I love you both. Chad, thank you so much for being with us. But my thoughts and prayers are focused on Molly and that everything goes well for her and that she's back home soon. I love you both. Thank you for being with us today. And to everybody out there, please cherish your loved ones, cherish your fellow firefighters, and be careful out there.